So what's good, TMG fam? It's your boy Ellen. I'm back with another reaction. How y'all feel? Welcome back to the channel. Salute, man. And where are we headed? Back to the swamp. Back to the swamp, bro. This is terrifying things found in swamps. One of the most dangerous places you could be. But some people call it home. You know what I'm saying? So our danger is other people's home. You know what I mean? So we're going to check this video out. If you're new to the channel, man, hit that subscribe button. Join the fam. Here we go.
Let's face it, swamps are pretty ominous. Even without any history of unsavory incidents or cryptids, these damp, gloomy
Dog was like, something ain't right here.
places just seem to inspire dread in anyone who looks upon them. But as you'll soon see, sometimes there's more to be afraid of than merely the murky waters threatening to swallow all who dare enter them, or the glowing eyes that appear to follow you from between every tree. From eerie dolls with mysterious secrets to legendary creatures of the swamps of South Carolina, here are some terrifying things found in swamps.
Hey, I got some swamps in Carolina? I didn't know that.
CHUCKY'S sisters. In October 2014, when Chief Deputy Joe Sedinger caught a brief glimpse of what looked like a couple of porcelain dolls while passing the highway-side swamplands of Bear Creek Swamp, Alabama, he paid little mind. It was only when, a couple of days later, he began receiving calls from freaked-out locals complaining about those very same dolls that Joe realized he probably should have paid them more attention.
Yeah.
So what made these dolls so unsettling? Well, when Joe and his fellow officers took a closer look, they recovered not just a couple, but a whopping 21 dolls from the water, all eerily skewered atop bamboo stakes. The majority of the dolls were made of porcelain, and many had their faces covered in what looked like white spray paint. Even though Joe thought it was probably just a prank, he couldn't help being creeped out by his find, especially since Bear Creek Swamp had something of a reputation regarding the bizarre and sinister. Locals often reported hearing loud booms coming from the swamp's depths, and as a rite of passage, generations of teenagers have entered it at night, looking for creatures and angry spirits locals refer to as haints, said to roam the misty area. In the end, however, no one ever came forward to collect their dolls, and Joe filed the incident under one of the region's weirdest, creepiest unsolved mysteries. But Alabama isn't the only place with a creepy doll problem in its swamplands. Another town with a doll-related mystery is the tiny Australian settlement of Lucinda, where its 406 locals have long been terrified of a certain haunted doll perched on a swing next to the nearby swamp. Many of the residents believe the doll to be a harbinger of bad luck, and that even saying a quick hello to it would be enough to ensure failed fishing trips and dangerous motor troubles for boats headed out to the sea nearby. As for how the doll got there to begin with, no one is really sure, and most people are too wary to go digging into the situation. That said, some folks claim the doll was placed there by an elderly local couple who simply wanted to add a splash of color to the surrounding swamp. A nice idea, sure, but for anyone encountering a doll perched on a swing in the middle of a creepy swamp, I have a feeling the only color being added to their lives would be a splash of brown in their underpants. Everglade discovery. In October 2020, snake...
It's like you know it's out there, but when you see it, you just like still in awe.
Hunters Ryan Osborne and Kevin Pavlidis got ready for a hard day's work of tracking and capturing Burmese pythons around Florida's Everglades wetlands. The species, which became established in Florida as a result of escaped and released pets, has no natural predators in the area, and has in recent years skyrocketed in population, decimating indigenous plant and animal species. Ryan and Kevin knew that if they managed to catch even a single one, they could reel in up to $150 as a reward. Easy money if you've got the stones for the job. Ryan and Kevin were hunting along the L-28 tieback, a canal about 35 miles west of Miami, when just before midnight they spotted an incredibly long female snake.
First of all, to be hunting these jokers at midnight in the swamps, oh yeah, y'all different. Y'all way different.
Slinking through the swampy waters. Kevin, who had never seen a snake as big, couldn't stop his hands from shaking as they waded in after it. Careful not to spook the snake by splashing too much, Ryan secured its tail, while Kevin tried to get its head under control. The snake immediately started to writhe, and it took the pair's full strength to keep the python from breaking free and potentially wrapping itself around one of them. Finally, once they managed to pull the slippery beast out of the canal, Ryan and Kevin took a moment to bask in its mammoth size. When they had it weighed, the snake came in at a whopping 104 pounds, and with measurements of 18 feet and 9 inches, it snatched the world record for being the longest Burmese python ever caught in Florida. As impressive and horrifying as that is, the record-breaking python is actually...
Did he say the world record for the longest caught in Florida? Wasn't that? Oh, maybe it's something wrong with me.
Only one of 5,000 Burmese pythons removed from the Everglades between 2017 and 2020. So next time you find yourself splashing around in the swamps and marshes of Florida, if you feel something large, mean, and scaly brush your feet, it might not be a gator. The Whistler.
Both are bad. What do you mean it might not be a gator? That's even worse.
When he was 8 years old, Reddit user BingBong1234 loved to take late-night walks with his mom and their family dog. The streets were pretty quiet most of the time, what with their neighborhood being located on the suburban fringes of Lansing, Michigan, and bordering a gloomy swamp. On one particular evening at around 11 p.m., as Bing Bong and his mom were walking along the edge of the swamp, an eerie noise echoed through the air. Whistling. At first, the Redditor thought it was a bird, but something about it made it sound distinctively human-like. But who could be lurking in the dark depths of the swamp alone at this time of night? The whistle's pitch continued to rise and fall, and as it did, Bing Bong's mom grew visibly concerned. She grabbed the Redditor's hand and made them return home immediately, without ever explaining why. And at 8 years old, Bing Bong didn't really think about asking. 2 years passed, and with the incident lost at the back of his mind, the Redditor decided to take his dog out again one night, only this time by himself. He finished the walk without much trouble, but just as he passed one particular spot at the swamp's edge, he heard it again. The whistle. As soon as it reached his ears, a chill traveled down his spine. Bing Bong immediately returned home and made sure never to pass that spot in the dark again. For more than a decade, he actually succeeded in avoiding the whistler's clutches, until one foggy night when he was 24 years old. Having recently moved from Michigan to South Dakota, Bing Bong and his girlfriend decided to spend Independence Day camping along the bank of the Missouri River, where they could relax and watch the fireworks. For the festivities, the police had cleared the river of any boats, so the Redditor, being a videographer, decided to seize the opportunity and film the calm, empty waters for a bit. Only, it appeared not all the boats had obeyed the no-boating order. Somewhere, on the shadowy lake, the Redditor heard the unmistakable sound of a paddle methodically dipping in and out of the water. He squinted into the growing darkness and could just make out a figure steering a canoe about 65 feet offshore. Brushing it off, Bing Bong continued to film the lake until suddenly he heard something that left him frozen, riddled with goosebumps. A slow whistling.
I bet that shook his entire world. Certain sounds in life you never forget. I imagine that was one of them for him.
The exact same whistle he had heard all those years ago. Unable to make out the whistler's face in the dark, Bing Bong tried to be rational about the whole thing. It couldn't possibly be the same whistler, right? Well, what happened next only convinced him more. As the whistler lined up with Bing Bong on the lake, they stopped paddling, turned to face him, and let out their signature sound once more. Moments passed, and the whistler didn't move a muscle. Only when the Redditors stood up and shouted straight at them, asking who they were, did they turn and paddle out of sight. It was too dark for Bing Bong to capture much of the actual person in the canoe, but he did manage to film their whistle before they entirely disappeared. Take a listen.
You whistling? Is it you?
Pretty creepy, right? Was it all just a coincidence?
No.
Or had the whistler, whoever or whatever they were, followed the Redditor all the way from Michigan? To this day, Bing Bong absolutely hates going out into the dark, afraid he might encounter the whistler again. With whistling demonic entities being a recurring theme as harbingers of death in several folkloric legends around the world, his fear is certainly understandable. But what do you think? Should we all be keeping an ear out for the whistler? Or is Bing Bong paranoid? Or worse, lying for internet points? Let me know in the comments. Bishopville Lizard Man. At 2 a.m. on June 29, 1988, 17-year-old Christopher Davis was driving home from work in Bishopville, South Carolina, when he blew a tire along the edge of Scape Ore Swamp. Christopher got out of the car to change the tire when he heard what sounded like someone running, getting louder and louder. Then, suddenly, from the darkness, it emerged. A 7-foot-tall humanoid creature with blazing red eyes, green scaly skin, and long black claws. Christopher jumped into his car for safety, but the lizard-like creature attacked it, ripping off the mirror and gouging the roof. Unable to get inside, the creature grew tired and scampered off, leaving Christopher alive to tell the tale. This was the account the 17-year-old immediately gave to the Lee County Sheriff's Department, who didn't exactly take him all that seriously. That was until the Lizard Man struck again. Over the course of the summer, more cars, most of them vacant thankfully, were attacked in the vicinity of Scape Ore Swamp. Police arrived time and again to find fenders ripped off, antennas bent, and deep scratches along the bodies of the cars. Pretty soon, more people reported seeing an enormous, scaly man lurking in the swampland, and the media absolutely lapped these stories up. The local radio station, WCOS, even offered a $1 million reward to anyone able to capture the creature alive. However, as winter arrived, sightings of the Lizard Man came to a stop. Its summertime reign of terror was seemingly over, though the legendary figure made brief reappearances throughout the passing decades, with occasional sightings and a smattering of vehicle attacks being reported, always within the vicinity of Bishopville's swamplands. Visitors to Scape Ore Swamp are encouraged to remain vigilant even today, just in case the Bishopville Lizard Man decides to show its face. So, if you're ever in the area, you better keep an eye out. Whether the lizard man is real, or just a prank-loving teenager in a costume, or even some kind of deformed alligator, encountering it unprepared definitely doesn't seem like fun. Before we wade into the murky waters of our next terrifying swamp discovery, why not take a moment to give this video a thumbs up? And don't forget to subscribe to be amazed so you don't miss any of my latest uploads. Now, I hope you've got your rain boots on because things are about to get muddy. Frozen in time. In spring 2012, the tourists of Sene, a nature reserve in France, were horrified when two incredibly creepy figures appeared seemingly out of nowhere in the swampy marshlands one day. The creatures were pale, thin, and slender, and appeared to be frozen in time. And just as quickly as they appeared, the creatures vanished again. That was until in July 2016. They returned, only this time with 6 more friends. So where did the statuesque creatures come from, and what were they doing in the wetlands of France? Well, as real as the creatures seemed, they were in fact designed and handmade by French sculptor and artist Sofia Prestigiacomo to reflect humankind's oftentimes complicated relationship with nature. Each of the figures are modeled on iron structures with mud and algae, which, after being left to dry, takes on a skin-like appearance. Over time, as the figures slowly started to decompose,
That's the one right there. Like the other ones catch you, but this one here is so camouflaged that when you finally realize it, bro, this right here can mess your, like slow your heartbeat or give you a heart attack.
this replicated skin changed both color and texture, allowing the figures to eventually blend in with the organic landscape.
Yeah.
Even though there's certainly an unsettling, cryptid-like appearance to the design of Sophie's swamp creatures, their shifting nature does give them a certain beauty. That is, if you find loose flaps of swamp water-addled skin attractive. Swamp Sirens. Shortly after joining the military, Reddit user HK Fook got deployed on a 2 to 4 week field exercise
You see, he tried to pronounce that without saying what it actually
in the swamps of the southern United States. On his 6th night in the swamp, the Redditor and his squad were just dozing off when a spine-chilling sound echoed from somewhere in the woods.
Nope.
It sounded like a mix between a roar and a scream, like no animal any of them had ever heard before. They all darted upright, and as they did, the entire surrounding swamp went quiet. The frogs stopped croaking, the crickets stopped chirping. The only sound that remained was the screaming, which continued to grow louder.
I've always heard silence in the woods, swamps, or wherever is bad. That's what I've always heard.
Moments passed before suddenly, strange lights started to appear in the distance. The Redditor had enough. Thinking it was just someone playing a joke, he and 2 other soldiers headed toward the lights, while the rest stayed behind at camp. But the farther HK walked, he realized the lights weren't getting any closer, and the ground was starting to get too boggy to navigate. In a way, he felt like they were being put in a trance, lured toward the lights like sailors being ensnared by sirens. This unsettled HK so much that he stopped the other soldiers in their tracks, and the 3 of them immediately turned back. Only less than 20 feet away, the ear-splitting roar once again echoed out from the darkness in the waterlogged area of the swamp they'd just been retreating from. The soldiers turned and watched in fear as the distant lights traveled higher and higher, like someone scaling a tree at lightning pace. But just like that, the lights and the roar both vanished, and the usual background noise slowly returned to the swamp. With no rational explanation as to what had happened, all the soldiers could do was try to go back to sleep. Except,
Oh, no. How you going back to sleep after? Who getting a good night's sleep after that? Not me. No, ain't no sleeping going on in here. Not at all.
HK couldn't put the incident out of his mind.
Right.
When he checked a map of the area on a later occasion, he noticed that the lights had been in a part of the swamp that, after the heavy rains they had experienced at the time, would have been inaccessible to humans. So, what was it that roamed the dark that night? If paranormal explanations float your swamp boat, one explanation might be some will-o-wisps, ghost lights from both English and European folklore that are allegedly seen by travelers at night, especially over bogs and swamps. Will-o-wisps are known to be impossible to catch, and in European folklore, they supposedly lure travelers to their demise. Even though this legend lines up with both why the Redditor couldn't reach the lights and why he felt entranced by them, there's also a more scientific explanation that's just as intriguing. In modern science, it's generally accepted that the will-o-wisp phenomenon people occasionally report seeing is caused by the oxidation of phosphine, diphosphane, and methane, compounds that are all produced by decomposing plants, which happen to be in abundance in swampy bogs. Since phosphine and diphosphane mixtures can spontaneously ignite upon contact with oxygen, only small quantities are needed to ignite the much more abundant methane to create bright, temporary floating fires, or will-o-wisps. Now, even though that could explain the lights, what about the terrible sound? My best guess, it was most likely just a cougar. Here's a clip of what their roar sounds like. Seems to fit the bill.
But I feel like you would distinguish that though as an animal. You know what I mean? Even though I've heard different ones where I thought it was somebody screaming and people have been like, no, that's an animal. But that there, you can distinguish that.
Oh, doesn't it? But even though there may be a rational explanation for what this Redditor encountered, I admit, I'd be pretty darn terrified too if I heard that sound and saw those sights out in the middle of a pitch-black swamp.
Facts.
2 is a crowd. In July 2020, Peter Joyce, an experienced kayaker, was having the time of his life floating down a section of North Carolina's Waccamaw River he'd never experienced before, when all of a sudden his dream adventure turned into nothing short of a nightmare. As he was paddling downriver, taking in the surrounding swamp and its wildlife, Peter heard what he initially thought was a fish jumping to his left. Well, let's just say it definitely wasn't a fish. Check it out.
Scariest thing ever in life. Just seen my cousin on Facebook yesterday or the day before yesterday, and he's in Pittsburgh and he had his kayak with me, and this is what only thing I could think about. Like the scariest thing in life right here, bro.
That thing that charged him and knocked him out of his kayak? An alligator. Throughout the incident, Peter said his mind was entirely blank. He couldn't do anything as the alligator dove at him, nor when it struck the side of his kayak. Luckily, he did manage to grab onto a branch for support, and somehow successfully got back into the kayak before becoming lunch. But even though Peter came away from the incident without a scratch, it did leave a rather deep mark in his mind. Throughout his years of river kayaking, Peter had seen many an alligator splash and make a ruckus in the water, but he never had one continuously charge at him. It's likely this particular alligator only became aggressive since it was mating season. as is typical in the North Carolina region from June to early July. And
I don't care what the reasoning was behind it. For that alone, never be in a kayak, bro. No. You see me in a kayak, you best believe I'm in a pool. I'm in a pool. That's it. No. Bro, it tipped him over. At that point, what could he do? Nothing. He was at the mercy of that gator. And if that gator wanted him, he could have got him. No, thank you.
And even though Peter never did get to fully explore that section of the river before he was attacked, he fully intends to go back. Only next time, he'll probably try to pick a time of year when he's not as likely to rile up the locals. Muddy-handed. In the 1990s, Reddit user Annie Oakley and her husband were staying with her in-laws on an 11-acre wooded swamp, while the pair were waiting for their own place to be move-in ready. Since her husband didn't drive, Annie had to regularly take him to and from his midnight shift at a nearby late-night restaurant. But even though she usually loved going outside after dark, there was just something about her in-laws' property which gave the Redditor the creeps. One night, when her husband was at work, Annie accidentally locked herself out of the house, and with her in-laws away for the night, decided to just sleep in her car. However, sometime around 3 a.m., the Redditor woke up to find her heart inexplicably racing and her hair standing on end. It was like she had woken up from a nightmare, except she couldn't remember having one. Annie was just coming to grips with reality when she heard something outside. A dragging noise across the gravel and a faint tapping on the car's exterior. The Redditor looked frantically out the window, but she couldn't see anything in the dark. Was it an animal lurking around outside, or something much more sinister? Annie tried to scare the unwanted visitor off by turning on the car's headlights, but the shuffling movements outside simply wouldn't stop. This continued until just before sunrise, when Annie finally left to pick up her partner from the restaurant. But just because night was over, it didn't mean her problems were something of the past. As soon as Amy reached the restaurant, she hurried inside, feeling thoroughly unnerved. Only when she returned to her car with her husband, she found it splattered with muddy handprints. Some still with patches of water plants like duckweed stuck on them. The moment her husband saw it, he turned white as a sheet. Apparently, it wasn't the first time something like that had happened. As a child, he'd been camping outside with his siblings one night when something shuffled into the area around their tents and left muddy, duckweed-riddled handprints all over everything. Annie's husband thought the coincidence was too big to ignore and insisted they stayed at the restaurant until it was brighter outside. Since that day, Annie has never gone outside after dark while staying at her in-laws, and she's not the only one.
Do you blame her?
Years later, Annie's 5-year-old daughter began refusing sleepovers at Grandma's because she was too afraid of the monster she had seen in the swamp one night. So, either the Redditor's in-laws have a long-running pranking streak going on, or there's some muddy-handed creature, natural or otherwise, running amok. Either way, I'm not sure I'd like to spend a night there to give whatever it is the National Geographic treatment, would you? Have you ever made any chilling discoveries in a swamp?
Nope, and don't plan on making it, bro. You know what I mean? The closest I'm gonna get is these type of videos and swamp people. That's it. That is it. And some guy I saw today who was a wrestler that turned, he went from being a wrestler, pro wrestler, he didn't make it quite all the way to like WWE or whatever it is, but he was in the run-ins and he went back to the swamp because something happened to his mom, and then that's what he's known his whole life. So I saw a video on that earlier today, which was super, super dope. So other than those type of videos, that's the closest I'm getting, man. No kayaks either, bro. Y'all let me know, man, if there's any experienced kayakers. Does that not, like, I know you factor it in, but you getting back out there after something like that? Let me know. I gotta hear from y'all. What did he do wrong that y'all might have thought? Maybe it was the time of the year, like they were saying, it was mating season, he shouldn't have been out there. Or is this just, it comes with the territory? Y'all let me know. This was Terrifying Things in the Swamp. It's your boy up, man. Till the next one, I'm gone. Peace.